repeating myself, Town of Sherborn Zoning Board of Appeals, December 14th, 2023. Board members, Jonathan Fitch, Zach McBride, Rick Novak are here. Associate member Todd Labby is here. Jonathan, did you miss our last meeting, I think?
I did.
But you watched the tape.
I have not watched the tape yet.
Okay. In that case, I asked that you do so, just that by the time we get to voting, you'll need to clean that up. Okay,
excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Jonathan, you missed the December 5th meeting, but you were at the last meeting of the
on this matter,
40B.
I have not missed a meeting.
Right.
In that case, I withdraw my request, Mr. Fitch, with great respect.
Well, I will review the tape of the December 5th meeting.
If you wish. It's probably going to be
minutes today, so.
Yep. Okay, so a couple of quick administrative. Select board chair, do you want to call your meeting to order since you've got people here?
I'll just open our meeting. So we have 4 members now. So do I have a motion to open the select board meeting?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. Eric?
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
Marion?
Aye.
And I am aye as well. And like I said, it's not a select board meeting, but it allows us to ask questions, but we're just participating as everyone else is.
Awesome.
Diane's going to read what we're going to do, but it's just the same as I just said. You want to read that quickly, Diane?
Sure, I can. So the select board are in attendance is zoning board of appeals meeting regarding the continuation of public hearing for Farm Road Homes 40B and Greenwood Homes 40B.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Okay.
I make a comment, Chair, just while we have the floor.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I just want to comment that we actually do not need to hold an actual meeting to actually ask questions. It's just in case we actually respond off each other's questions. We have a legal opinion of that. I want to make I do want to make that technical difference there. That's all.
Right. This will protect you from appearing to consult with each other.
Exactly.
Outside of a meeting, whereas now you're doing it inside of a meeting.
But there are rules that allow us to ask questions, attend the meeting, even when the quorum. But this is just in case. That's all.
Perfectly fair. Good advice from town council. Okay, a couple of administrative items. We'll go through these very quickly. I'd put on the agenda new approval requirements for larger project inspection fees. That is before Paul Haverty starts jumping up and down. That is a nothing burger. It just happens that our plumbing inspector and our electrical inspector and people like that are part-time. And when we have a large project, whether it's a 40B or not a 40B, and a bunch of units are coming online at the same time, we actually don't have enough staff to run around and do perfectly normal routine inspections. And that leaves the zoning enforcement officer having to pay people overtime, then having to go beg those horrible selectmen. Oh wait, they're on the meeting with us. Those horrible selectmen for more money. So his request to us was that we pass a rule, which I will draft if the board members so desire, saying that we will ask in projects of a size over maybe 10 units that the developer contribute money towards the actual and reasonable out-of-pocket cost of those fees, and that at the end of that, the zoning enforcement officer would document what he actually had to spend and give the rest back. This is not a revenue source for the town. It's not punitive. It's just an administrative ease to try to make things easier for the developers and for the town. So that's my proposal to my board members. Anybody else, I guess, can comment on it if they wish. What do you all think?
Well, I think that's a good idea. I support that change.
All right, I'll take that as a motion to me to draft something and come back. And I'll second it.
I so move.
All right, moved and seconded. Any further discussion from the public or any board member? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Do it by roll call. Novak votes aye.
Fitch, aye.
Labby, aye. You're on mute, Zach.
Bride, aye.
Okay, great. 3-0 carries. I'll write something up. Okay, let's talk about new hearing dates for these two 40Bs. Mr. Haverty, you can double check my counting. I think this one, the first, the first one, which is Farm Roads expires. I had it written down, but I don't have that piece of paper here. Early February. I think second, third, something like that. And the other one, Greenwood, could go to March, although I don't think we'll need more time on Greenwood. But I just want everybody to hear that we have that deadline coming up, and probably not at this meeting, but very likely, Paul, at the next one, we'll have to talk about whether or not we want an extension, what extension you'll be agreeable towards doing with us. So just wanted to flag that for everybody. In theory, as of right, Mr. Murchison and Mr. Haverty could say, sorry, when your 180 days is up, it's up. You have to close the hearing, and we're going to make you do that. We would hope that if we are going about our business expeditiously, that they would grant us additional time, which they can do under the statute, but which they do not have to do under the statute. Is that a fair recap, Mr. Haverty? I'll take that as a yes. We've got a little garbled in the meeting.
Yes, that was a fair recap. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you
Okay,
now.
good. Thank you.
Okay, so can we talk a little bit about the next date for these two? Although I think the next date will probably be the end of this show for Greenwood. I think, unless I get surprised tonight, we're pretty close to the end of the line on that. I still think on Farm Road there's some wood to be chopped, as they say in the deal business. When could people do in January? And I'm talking to my board members mostly. I really can't do very early January. I'm having shoulder surgery on the 2nd, so I'll be out of action for a little bit.
Well, I am not available the week of January 22nd.
So could we try to do something before then?
Yes,
Yes. The week of the
So-
15th?
like the 15th or the 16th. 15th is Martin Luther King Day.
Right.
That's probably not a good choice.
The 16th is fine.
That's,
16th works for me.
16th is a Tuesday, right?
Yes.
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 I think that works fine. Okay. Tuesday the 16th, assuming we continue both of these tonight. Yeah, so Mary Moore had said she did the count to January 28th. Not sure I got that date, but that's definitely the right area code. So we have room to put a meeting on the 16th. But at the meeting on the 16th, we'll have to either decide if we're going to extend or decide to hold a short meeting before we do run out to hold any further public commentary. All right, January 16th, 2024. Thank you, everybody. Okay, final administrative item. Mr. Murchison, we'd had some emails back and forth with Mr. Booley. Tetra Tech, I know you've done a good job. You have, in my view, been very light on your feet and cost effective. But I think you were saying you do wish some more money, and now is a good time to make that proposal so Mr. Murchison can hear it and decide whether he likes it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so we are over budget, over our original budget. These reviews, we really don't know what we're getting into until we actually get into the review. So we are over budget. Meetings have been a little bit more extensive than initially thought. So we will need additional budget. I guess whatever the applicant's comfortable with. I do suggest a small, say like 5K increments or however the board wants to do it. But until we know the final scope, it's hard to kind of nail a price down to that.
Well, Bob, I'll be curious as to your view. Just as I sort of look at things from 50,000 feet, it looks like there's additional commentary we're going to need from Steve, at least on the septic side. We're definitely not closed up on the water supply, public water supply side. I think, and Steve, I'm looking at you as I'm saying this, that most of the non-water, non-septic design issues were not finalized, but they were close. As in, I don't see, tens of hours of your company's time on the rest of the site design, because you'd said what you'd said and Bob had said what he'd said. Is it mostly water and sewer going forward? Water, sewer, and stormwater, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't received any responses to our initial letter. So I mean, there's still some time there, depending on
Okay.
how the board wants to attack it.
Right,
So yeah, I mean, we haven't heard anything back on stormwater or the site design issues.
okay.
And there is
well-
a continued septic.
So would your proposal be an additional 5,000? And then you can, we'll see how it goes. Obviously, the idea is not to just use the developer as an ATM. But
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
also not fair for you to be working for free. So
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I'd have to, it's kind of hard. I mean, I'd have to look at it right now just to see what I'm gonna get back for responses. If the
Right.
board's expecting a full response letter from us, that's gonna be a long time, so. I know we're over budget now. I don't know the exact amount. So it is gonna cut into that 5K amount. If it's possible to kind of calculate everything offline, I can do it, but with the applicants.
Yeah.
involved.
Mr. Merchant, where are you on all this?
So I guess I think it would be great. I don't have any problem with a modest increase in the budget. That seems reasonable. It also seems reasonable that I would love to see some type of invoices and accounting for what we've spent thus far. I haven't seen anything. So just to come in and say you spent all my money, I'd love to see what you spent my money on.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, we did just send invoice to the town, it has comments, everything that we've done so far.
Yeah,
so,
great. Okay, so if
that's all-
somebody in
that's
the
all
town
track.
can just forward that to us, that would be great. And I agree, Steve, we can take it offline with Jeremy and Jeannie, Rick, if that's all right with you.
No,
but-
that'd be great. I'd be delighted to have you all working out offline because I think we're all trying to go the same direction. Ms.
Exactly.
Guthrie.
I just would like to get some invoices.
Of course. Accountability, perfectly
Yep,
fair.
exactly.
Ms. Guthrie,
Bob, I can forward you all the copies of the invoices. I'll scan them and
Perfect.
send them off to you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Mr. Lesser, your electronic hand is up.
Right, Michael Lesser, 54 Forest Street, Conservation Commission. Just wanted to make sure that when you're looking at future work, that you look at the comments from the Conservation Commission.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I assume that'll be covered at some point.
Fair enough. Okay.
Actually, on that topic, Rick, I'll let Paul jump in here, but it's my understanding that the peer reviewer is there to peer review our work and not the work of other folks. And so
Correct.
just want to make sure we've got our proper guardrails on what the peer reviewer is doing, right?
Yeah, you and Paul had said that before, and you were correct under the statute and the regulations.
Yeah.
We cannot hire a peer reviewer for Scott Horsley's report submitted by the Moores. That wasn't submitted by the developer, so we can't peer review it.
Well, and I guess to the extent the Conservation Commission or others in town or town bodies rather have questions relative to our plans, that seems fair. What doesn't seem appropriate is, new stuff coming in. For example, just an example, I'm not picking on you, Michael, but there was a letter today about you all putting a condition on us on how the asphalt is treated. And it just doesn't seem like that's something the peer reviewer should be doing a lot of work on. It's kind of outside of the scope of what we're up to.
Yeah, I have to agree with Mr. Murchison on that one. That is not something submitted by, that's a classic example of something not submitted by the developer.
Right, exactly. Thank you.
Mr. Moore.
Hi, Brian Moore, 49 Farm Road, a butter to the Farm Road Homes proposed development. In cases where we bring forward scientific information or information that the ZBA determines is germane to the development, does the ZBA have the opportunity to then direct the third-party reviewer to take that into consideration in their comments in their review of the application?
They should review all the materials. What they can't do is peer review the science or the engineering.
Okay.
So if they see something in the record submitted by, again, I'll pick on Scott's report, just because it is relevant and it is in the record, but it did not come from the development team. They can certainly take a look at that, but they can't peer review it.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Michael, can you lower your hand, please?
No, I had a subsequent comment.
Okay, remember, we're trying to move ahead quickly, and we're now having an awful lot of public comment on Tetra Tech fees.
Well, it's also the
I'm-
process of what you're doing of just to understand how you are reacting and processing something. One thing is when you look at the wetland comments from Conservation Commission, that it's, right, we're asking for some work done based on the fact that there's an incomplete landscape plan there that hopefully it's viewed in that sense.
And if the peer reviewer sees the landscape plan and says, I think it's incomplete, that's perfectly fair game for him to say, I think that's incomplete.
Okay, and then on the issue of something technical like the road sealant that Bob brought up, do you have the ability to consider those kind of conditions and help your road?
We can certainly consider those things, and if we decide you're right on the road ceiling, we might be able to condition it. What we can't do is spend the developer's money having the peer reviewer evaluate that.
No, I just wanted to make sure you have some means or way of processing those kind of inputs.
Whether our processing is perfect or imperfect or somewhere in between is for others to decide.
Okay, thank you.
But there's a whole lot of things we can't send out to the peer reviewer. That's Bob's point. He's
I
correct.
understand that part.
Okay. Can we move on to substance? Yes, I don't see any other hands. Okay. Greenwood Lane. I think our conversation on Greenwood, board members, is fairly short. But anybody out there from Greenwood or interested in that site, please correct me if I have it wrong. I think there was the septic comments had come in. The town had raised some technical concerns. And Deshaun Wang had responded to those in a way that looked, at least to me, responsive. I don't know, Steve, if you saw any trailing lines on any of the Greenwood Lane's materials that were not right. I know one of the homeowners who's not on had asked about the distance from her well, and the development team had sent it an email with that exact distance. So Steve, where are you?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't see anything. We did review the plans and the revised submittal. We didn't see anything that would really hold up, issuance of the permit on for this project.
For Greenwood, right?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Stessel. Ms. Stessel, sorry, Todd.
Yeah,
Shows up as Todd
I
Stessel.
forget my husband's name, but same last name. It's Greenwood Street. We live across the street. And I am just going to echo Katie's question because she's on a plane so that we can all get the answer, which it sounds like you have the answer to, which is great. So I'm just going to read it as she wrote it because it's very articulate. In reviewing the submitted plans, there is no indication of distance between the proposed wells for each of the 4 lots in relation to the abutters across the street on Greenwood. We live at 21 Greenwood Street. We're at 19, directly across from lot 4. And based on the proposed well siting, I believe that our well may be very close, if not within 75 feet of the proposed well, et cetera, et cetera. The distance between the proposed well and our septic is indicated, but not the information that we're seeking. So it sounds like you have it. So if you could just share it with all of us, that would be
Sure.
lovely.
The information we got, which was from the development team, and so you can certainly take a look and scale it yourselves on the plan, or have somebody scale it for you on the plan, was that your well is 130 feet. Did I have that exactly right, Bob, from the nearest septic system?
Not the Stessel's. It's the well of the woman who asked the question originally.
Ms. Shannon.
As a practical matter, I did check both wells, and they are both approximately 130 feet from our proposed well. If you look on page 2, and in her email, she said we didn't, we weren't showing her well, and she was looking at only the front page of the plan. If you look at page 2 and page 3 of the comprehensive permit plan submitted to you all, you'll see both those wells are located on there, and you can scale them out yourselves, but approximately 130 feet. The Sherborn Board of Health setback from one well to another well is 75 feet. And it's not, that's not something that's required to be shown on the plan, but it is there and you can scale it out.
Okay. Ms. Stessel, did you hear that? Was that responsive to your question?
Yep, I'm gonna have to, I guess, take a look and scale
Sure.
it as you
Check it
said.
out.
I mean,
Okay.
that's not my expertise, but I will check it out.
Yeah.
Right.
And by the way, as is typical in town, we use Board of Health records to put those wells on the plan.
Right.
And those pulled from the Board of Health records.
Speaking of the Board of Health, Ms. Beardsley. Your hand is raised.
Yes, it is indeed raised. Darrell Beardsley, 54 Forest Street, Board of Health. And I think Mark will be able to address this a little bit better as to exactly where we are on those plans at the moment. I do know that one concern is that there are discrepancies on locations of features on these plans versus on plans for abutting properties. And so there needs to be some resolution of that issue. And Mark, if you are on.
Yes, I am here. And I did sit down with the engineer beginning of this week to review the deficiencies that were sent out to him as well as the owner, Bob. We did receive notice that the plans that were submitted from DEP would need legal boundaries, and we were informed that because of that, right now, the previous plan, it shows the lot lines as estimates and so forth. So that will need to be resolved. We have another land surveyor that is indicated an abutting property at 34 Greenwoods well is 25 feet off the proposed property line. It was 25 feet off the property line of that house when that septic plan was drawn up about, I think, 10 years ago. So 2 surveyors showed it 25 feet off. And so the issue still remains, are these legal boundaries? If they're not legal boundaries on these 4 lots, the Board of Health is not to issue a disposal construction permit until that is completed. But they did explain that a conceptual approval could occur. There's another note from the DEP that the DEP Title V is to be used as a conservative approach. And there's some concern that there's 2 types of soils on couple of the lots, and unless proven otherwise through sieve analysis by the applicant, we need to use the conservative methods, and that would be to apply a loading rate per the Title V requirements at the conservative level. And then the other issue that is up to ZBA is the well regulations, and Darrell, I'll speak of that if you wish for me to speak on that later, or whenever you wish for me to speak.
Okay, Mark, that's helpful. Let's unpack that and break it down into pieces. Where the lot lines are, that's relatively easy to fix. Get a registered land surveyor out there and have him or her say where they are. Those people are extremely precise and they get it right. In the exceedingly rare instance, which I've only seen a couple of times in over 40 years, where the registered land surveyors disagree, we can figure that out, but they almost never do. So just get the registered land surveyor out there, and then it'll settle that problem.
Rick, can I just
yeah.
address it for a quick second? So the land surveyor has come out and done a survey of this land, and we believe when we do the A&R, we'll get the actual. Obviously, we can't do the A&R yet because you haven't, approved the project. When we do the A&R, we'll get the actual meets and bounds, and we'll have exact numbers. The surveyor tells me we're within inches.
Okay.
And there is a location discrepancy. I agree with Mark on that one well next to our lot 1. I believe it's 34 Greenwood. I looked at the as-built, and I think what's going on is it's a combination of two things, but the good news is it's very conservative the way it's drawn today. So where we show the well is about 5 feet from the property line, and where the foundation as built for 34 Greenwood shows it is much further from the property line, so more away from us. And so, if the neighbor's right and we're wrong, that's all to the good in terms of all the setbacks. We're using a setback to a well being 5 feet off. We estimated it from taping it out on the ground. The lines and the legal boundaries are done as completely as they are for any septic system approval in town. There's nothing unusual about them. When we do the A&R, we'll get it down to the last quarter of an inch. The well location, I think actually the as-built plan is probably just kind of thrown on there. In other words, it was surveyed as built for the buildings, right? Or for the building rather. I
And
don't
they just
think
copied the info. Yeah.
I don't think they picked up the well, and we definitely have not picked up the well. On an actual survey. It's an estimate of the location. All of that said, we're not up against any setbacks. We're in good shape on all of those setbacks. We're conservative.
Okay, so I guess my question to Daryl and Mark together is what's wrong or left open on Greenwood on the septic locations and design? We're not trying to close that hearing tonight, but if we were, what's the problem?
So as Mark mentioned, one of the issues, I'll just expand on his very technical description about the discrepancies between which soil type you choose or some other aspects of the soil testing. And the issue is you've got test pits that are spread across the area. They're to be representative of the area, but there are only 3 pits, 3 points around the location of where a septic might be going. And the reason DEP prefers the use of the more conservative interpretation is that you don't know what else for sure exists in the rest of that. And it's really a fairly minor adjustment
They're just
in
test
terms
pits.
of
There could be
flow
something
rate.
else in between.
And that's the standard practice. And he could explain that further if he likes, but that's the general gist of why the board is directed by Mass DEP to choose the more conservative.
I didn't ask the question clearly enough. What is the impact to these plans? What has to be done if you use the more conservative route?
Go ahead.
Okay,
Daryl.
Mark, go ahead.
Oh, okay. The size of the soil absorption systems, that's the leaching area, would have to be increased.
So they'd have to be
right
bigger.
now, Rick, just to frame this issue very crisply, we have a disagreement between Dr. Wang and Mark. Dr. Wang believes it's one soil type. Mark is taking the opinion that it's another soil type. We have it's a disagreement.
Not the first or last time two very smart people in good faith have disagreed.
Sure.
And I wouldn't say it's a disagreement. We both agree that there's 2 types of soils on 2 of the properties. So there's no disagreement. It's just what soil type do we use? And the state DEP has indicated use the more conservative approach and use the soil test classification that would require a larger septic system. Not by much. There's no disagreement on soil tests. Sorry, Rick. I didn't mean to.
No. I was just going to say, but couldn't this board say to you and the development team, please come back with an answer by January 16th on this? How big, what type of soils you're going to assume, and how big you're going to make your septic system. If the answer is we can't agree, then just be prepared to make your cases on the 16th, and we'll decide. Does that sound reasonable? does to the development team. Daryl and Mark, does it sound reasonable to you?
I'll yield to Daryl because I'm not a board member. I'm the health
Uh,
agent, but I'll yield to Daryl.
Yes, I think we have direction from DEP that says if there's agreement on those soil types, we are directed by them, informed by them, guided by them to use the more conservative.
To be clear, DEP has not looked at soil types. It's DEP has.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
I understand.
As a process, not on this specific project.
Right.
That's their process.
DEP has not been out there digging their own test pits, taking their own soils.
No.
What they've said is where you, the local Board of Health, have a conflict, use the more conservative assumption.
And again, as Mark explained, it's not a conflict, it's that both soil types are present.
Right, okay. So
Therefore,
potential, you don't know
lean
what to-
towards the, and that is the process that DEP wants us to follow.
All right.
I'm not
The-
sure,
the sh-
without going down a rabbit hole, Rick, I'm not sure that, and we can certainly get Deshang to give us a little technical discussion on this. I don't know that he would agree that there are two different soil types there, but we
Okay.
can ask him.
No,
we
well,
can
let me ask him.
right
He's got
now.
his hand up. He was the next person.
Great, thank you.
All right. Deshang Wang, what would you like to say to us on this topic?
Yeah, good evening. I think we went through probably a long list of deficiency, most of ecological minor clarifications or omission on both sides, see it or not to make it consistent. Then one major issue is how we interpret the soils. So give you a real field. So Mark is here. So if I describe it with the discrepancy in the field, you can correct me. So basically, what usually we do, we go in, digging the hole and looking each horizon of the soil profile, and then we will give in soil texture to each of the horizon, which is usually before the percolate testing is done. So, and obviously, this is probably the first time in 30 years or so in this field to this kind of content. I sent an email to DEP. I think they probably responded to Mark. I haven't seen that email myself. So, but in general, that's my personal experience for 30 years doing not is that percolate and the soil texture have some correlations. I even wrote a journal paper on that. So for the rate and correspondence. So from my experience, it's usually if you have less than 2 minutes per inch of soils, most likely they are sand. And if you have a 2 to about 10 inch, which could be a different perspective from different people, I found it's likely if you do a sieve analysis to confirm it, it will be likely loamy sand. So if anything above 10 to about 20, so it probably sandy loam. I don't want to confuse you. It's, in a way, the more permeable.
You're not confusing me, but I don't think you're answering my question.
Yes,
you're saying here's why I think I'm right, and I understand that, and I respect that. But
yes, no. I know you want a resolution for how to solve this issue. So there's obviously two ways. One is taking a very conservative way, just to take in the sandy loam and making the leaching field a little bigger. So we will discuss that. I did talk to Mr. Murchison on that. So that's a different solution. I can see Mark will accept it. There's no issue. I have no problem. And the other one is for us. If I understand Mark right, is so the DEP say you can take in the soil sample to send to the lab and really confirm if that soil is sandy loam or loamy sand, because there's a little bit experience, kind of judgment call in the field. So it's not really done by leaching field, but there's in the soil trainings, we all know that probably Mr. Bosley could all know that your hand to feel it, you will feel a cost or not, or that. So we all know that. So in a way, that's the one we probably didn't. In the next time when we do the testing, both Mark and I agreed we will do a little bit more careful evaluation in the field. But for this one, we already passed, so we have to come up with a solution, whether we are going to dig in a soil sample to send to the lab, or we just say, hey, call for the day. We have the room, we make it bigger. So we have a solution.
Okay, well, I think you hear the sense of at least the chair, if not the rest of the board, which is we'd really like to hear a solution you can both agree on, and if you can't, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Board members reel me in if you disagree, but I'd sort of like to see some consensus on this.
I would too.
Agreed.
All right, I see the other heads nodding. Okay, so Mark, Deshaun, Daryl, Bob, thank you all very much for your time on this point, and we hope that on the 16th you'll come back with a, guess what, we've all agreed on solution X. And if you don't, we'll figure it out.
And it won't just be it's also going to have to be the legal boundaries that have to be decided on. And I will share that email. I thought, Deshang, you received that. So that's an easy share. I can do that for you.
Yeah, Rick, the legal boundaries that are required under Title V, we've provided them, and they're the same as the legal boundaries that are provided on every market rate home in town.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say that didn't sound like that was going to be a tough issue. All right, Michael Lesser, your hand is up again.
Okay, 54 Forest Street, both energy and sustainability and conservation. I know you have a lot to do, and we've sent in there's two issues of comments. One is conservation wetland related, where sent in today about just recommending that you put a condition regarding fill into the comprehensive permit.
Right, and we saw that condition, and what I was expecting was that in the next month, we'll probably hear back from the development team as to whether or not they think that's fair or not. That's certainly what they've been doing with a lot of the suggested conditions from Tetra Tech. And so if it's okay with you, I'd like to give them a chance to react to it, and then we, the board, will make our decision.
Can I just comment on?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, basically, my view, Rick, is that they're bringing up a lot of issues that are not regulations on market rate housing or any housing, frankly, in town.
The fill is our regulation.
Mr. Lesser, Mr.
sorry.
Murchison gets to speak, and can you put down your hand, please, Mr. Lesser?
I haven't finished, that's why.
Well, actually, the board can decide that, so I'd ask you to please put down your hand. Mr. Murchison, go ahead.
The point I'm trying to make is that I fully understand that the Conservation Commission, the Energy Committee, and frankly, many of the energy things I'm going to do anyway. But as a matter of process, I feel very strongly that we should be conditioned only things if you believe they, are important and local needs. We'll let Paul define all of that for us. But, you can take a look at that. I am very, very uncomfortable with all of these various asks that are outside current town, not only town regulations, but town practices.
Right.
I mean, they're coming up with things, that don't exist in town regulations. We're not doing a special permit here. We're doing a comprehensive permit. And I would just ask you to take that into account.
You've stated that often and well and fairly. However, it is helpful to the board to know which items are in dispute. And if there is one, an energy conservation thing that you think we could not legally force you to do, but you're choosing to do it anyway, it would be very helpful for us to have you say that, because then it saves us the heartburn of figuring out which ones we're going to fight with you about.
Sure. I mean, many of the energy, like I said, many of the energy conservation requests on their part, frankly, I agree with, and we're going to do them. That's what I'm interested in developing. But I frankly don't think they should be conditioned if they're not in the local regulations or in any regulation.
Well, okay. So you have the legal right to tell us you're simply not going to respond to those things at all. I don't think that's in your interest. No. You got to pick here. If you're going to respond to them with what you'll do voluntarily, great. You don't have to. But if you don't, then we have to guess.
Paul, do you want
Mr.
to?
Haverty.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think we certainly can't respond in terms of which aspects we're willing to do voluntarily. I think that my client's position is that they shouldn't be included as conditions, irrespective of whether we're informing you we're willing to do them, because
Okay,
that would
so-
go beyond the scope of your authority.
But-
But
but-
we'll
but-
provide you a detailed response in terms
Yeah.
of what we're willing to do.
Okay, so yeah,
Absolutely.
because you absolutely have the right to tell us you're not gonna pick an energy thing for me, Bob, that we can talk about that you think is clearly not requirable under 40B, but
Well-
you're gonna do anyway.
Well, I'd actually prefer.
LED lights,
How about electric heat?
electric heat. Okay,
Non-fossil
great.
heat.
Good choice. Good choice. Okay. So it's helpful to us if you say, yeah, we intend these to be electric heat and it's here on the plans. And we don't think you can legally condition it, or we don't think you legally should condition it. That's a perfectly fair response. But it then helps us to know that the electric heat is there in the plans because we're approving a set of plans.
Correct.
Then we'll be able to tell what we're fighting about. But I
And
have
cer-
no. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, it certainly would be within your right to note that the plans show something and that the developer has agreed to do it.
Right. I think that's where we're going. And
I mean, I
and-
think
and-
a more concern, sorry to interrupt you, Rick.
Go,
sorry.
go ahead, Bob. No,
I was
please,
going
go
to say
ahead.
that like a more concerning issue for me on these letters that Michael had sent in just in the last 24 hours or so is, for example, and I'm not sure if it's Michael or if it's the whole Conservation Commission that is requesting that we be required to follow. The Conservation Commission has regulations on testing fill and other issues with fill if it's in the buffer zone. Okay. And that's a local regulation. And obviously, if I didn't want to follow that, I'd come and ask you for a waiver and don't want to follow it. As it turns out on Greenwood, we're not putting any fill in the buffer zone. And what Michael is coming back and saying is, we want to apply our regulations for fill in the buffer zone all the way outside the buffer zone. And I'm saying, no, that wasn't required of me at 53 Farm Road. It's not okay to require that of me. It's not a town regulation.
Nobody, certainly I am not objecting to your right to object to things you think are objectionable. Boy, that's overuse of a word, isn't it? But just take your position and tell us. You know,
Well, but I guess I'm a little unclear on process. That's all, Rick, here. Now I understand you want me to answer Michael's emails, but it's like a lot of scattershot. There's a lot of emails coming in from neighbors, from, various folks. Do I need to answer every one, or do you guys want to give me a list? Process wise, help me out.
I think you need to, you're the developer. If it comes in from a board member of one of our town boards, I think you probably ought to at least read it and think about whether or not you want to respond to it. And everybody else, they're citizens and maybe they've got great ideas and maybe they don't have great ideas. You're not required to respond to everything.
Yeah, no, I read all of them, Rick, and I take them very
Okay.
seriously.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But it's helpful for us to see the areas where you're saying, wait a second, that's a foul. I'm gonna use electric heat anyway, but you can't make me.
Sure, fair enough. Okay, I think I understand what you want. Great.
Okay. Mr. Lesser, very, very quickly.
Yes, just a quick thing on the fill. Part of the reason the fill
Okay, no,
requirements.
I don't want to have any argument on why you think the fill's a good idea.
No, that's not my point. It's not, that's the point,
Okay.
is that there is fill in the buffer zone by a septic system, so therefore that's a local reg. But it
Okay.
looks like there's grading, so we can't tell the difference between grading and fill. That's all.
Okay, so that's why I want Bob
Right.
to be responding so that when he says
Right.
there's no fill in the buffer zone, you can ping back, yes, there is, here it is on the plan right here.
Mhm.
I mean, we're just trying to narrow things down and get down to
Sure.
exact issues as much as we can. Okay. Other comments from anybody, board members or otherwise, on Greenwood? Otherwise, I'll make a proposal as to how we move forward on Greenwood. Staggering silence. Okay, good. Board members, I'd like to move that we continue the hearing for Greenwood till January 16th, 2024 at 7 p.m. And that's my motion. Outside the motion, I would hope that the parties would come back with a solution on the septic and at least a narrowed scope of bid, ask, yes, nos, as between what Mr. Lesser wants, what Mr. Murchison wants, so that the board can then parse through that and decide which of those we're going to get involved in.
I second that motion.
Okay, so the motion is simply to continue. Any further discussion of the motion to continue? Moved and seconded. All right, all in favor say aye. Have to do it by roll call. Novak votes aye.
Fitch, aye.
Labby, aye.
McBride, aye.
Okay, motion carries 3-0. All right, thank you, everybody. Okay, on to Farm Road Homes. And let me try to take a shot at recapping where we are on status. There's certainly been a great deal of information that has been flying around from lots of people. Thank you, everybody, for paying attention and the thoughtful and constructive tone of the information that's coming in. On title, board members, I don't think we've seen anything new on really new on title. A lot of people have made their positions clear. They've articulated them well. And we have chosen, and I suggest that we continue to leave that open and decide what we're going to do with it as we go further down the line. On site design, I thought I read the back and forth as being that Steve Booley, you and the Murchison team were pretty much on the same page on most site design issues, not completely. Maybe a major open item being the fire department's position on traffic. Certainly that didn't seem to be completely sewn up. And let me maybe stop there for a second and suggest that, Steve, would it be useful for the development team to show those plans to the fire department so they can speak for themselves?
Yeah, I think certainly the applicant should reach out to the fire department, determine if they're okay with access and everything, that they would be respond on it.
Yeah, we've actually been working with the fire department from the early days in designing the project. And at every step of the way and with any changes, I've checked in with them. I think they're very comfortable with site circulation. But if this board would like for the chief to write an email or whatever.
Yeah, maybe just a quick letter, just because some of the residents have said, well, the fire department should be concerned with this, the fire department should be concerned with that.
Sure.
And if the fire department says, speaking for ourselves, we're okay with this plan, dated thus and such, and this striping and these signs, we're not bound by that, but it's certainly helpful.
Yeah, and I think one of the answers that you've seen from us, Rick, is that before we get a building permit, we need sign off from the where you going? We need
Right,
sign.
but that sort of puts the rabbit in the hat, because
Sure.
if we needed to change your roads materially,
correct,
to fit the fire truck, saying, well, we'll wait till a building permit to deal with that, that's not practical.
So I'll get back with Zach and see, just make triple check that we're on the same page. But I talk to him every couple of weeks, and just to keep him updated on what we're doing. So I will get him to hopefully put something in an email to you all that he's comfortable with circulation and with, I think the issue raised today, you're right, is slightly different than site circulation. It's that the fire department would be slowed down by a traffic.
Could they get to a fire past your site from station, I think it's 2, that's there by the railroad tracks?
Yeah. Well, I will get him to tell us whether he's comfortable or not. So that's great to resolve that.
Okay, awesome. So I was going to move to water supply and septic, but board members, are we ready to go there? Do you think there are other things that are trailing lines that we should spend more time on? There were issues on traffic. Traffic reports came in. Vanass responded. Tetra Tech responded. And I'm just asking the board members right now, and then I'll hear from the public. on other sort of site design, title, and related issues other than water and septic related. Water, septic, and stormwater.
Well, speaking for myself, I don't see any other issues in those categories that we need to address.
Mr. McBride,
I can see.
it's not speak now or forever hold your peace. You can think of something later. Mr. Labby?
Maybe not the best time to say it, but one item that comes to mind when reading through the materials that have been circulating, I did see a rather definitive, interestingly definitive statement that the majority of residents at the proposed Farm Road site would not house children of school age. I had seen that in one of the documents. Mr. Murchison, I'm not saying it came from you. It's in one of the reports that I saw. It was in one of the bullet points. I'm happy to cite it later. We can
Okay,
take it offline.
Maybe you can circulate that later.
That is not something that anyone from my team would say, because frankly, I don't believe it's true. I hope there are families that live.
Nor do I, right? And that's why I'm raising
So I
it.
don't,
Okay.
unless you can kind of tell me more specifically, I'm happy to respond to anything. But I would need more specificity to respond to that. I don't believe that. I believe there will be families.
Right. Todd, was it like a safety issue, like there's no place for the school bus to stop, or one of those things, or?
I believe it fed into the traffic assessment. I'll go back and pull it out.
Well, all right, fine.
Excerpt.
Yeah, just circulate it.
That's why I raise it at this particular moment.
So happy to respond, Todd, once I know what it is.
Fair enough. Ms. Neutra for the select board.
Yes, just speaking for myself, Marion Neuter, 25 Prospect Street. I just have a question about the process here, Rick. In the Tetra Tech report, there was no attention paid to the ground-mounted solar arrays that I could see. And I don't know if that's part of a site design or under what category that will come up. I just want to make sure that it comes up.
That was part of the site design. Steve, you can speak for yourself. I thought you thought those were appropriate as drawn.
We did have a note in our report, comment 10. It notes there are some of the arrays are in that access easement along the east side of the property. But other than that, it didn't seem like there was anything egregious there as far as
So Rick, one thing that I would say is that we actually are going to make what we think is an improvement on the solar. We're going to consolidate it. We're going to consolidate it up to the top of the very northern part of the site where we already had some. We're going to add some more up there, and we're going to add a smaller array down near the parking canopy solar, and we're going to eliminate all of the solar that was near the wells on the eastern side of the property. We're going to have the same amount of power generation, but we're doing that frankly in response to two things. One, Steve made a good comment about the proximity to the wells. I'm not sure it was a big problem, but I looked at it and I said, we can consolidate into 2 areas on the site rather than 3, which I think is a good thing. And the other thing I'll say is that I responded to Michael Lesser's and the energy folks said, hey, Bob, don't cut down any trees you don't have to. And so I've significantly reduced by this change in the solar, which you'll see on the next site iteration, which I think will be fairly soon. But anyway, we've consolidated it. We'll be cutting many fewer trees in order to do solar. And that was in response to both Steve and to Michael Lesser's comments.
That's helpful. Thank you. When might we see that new set of site plans?
So I mean, I've had it for a long time, but I don't want to, give you a new site plan every week. So I was waiting kind of for the next big site plan, when you have for us to change or whatever. But you know, I think I did mention that I was going to make this change last time we talked also, but we haven't done a new site plan for you. And I just don't want to overwhelm you with, or the community, frankly, with too many site plans. This is an iterative process, obviously, but it's not one that I
Right.
want to send you a new site plan every week.
Ms. Neutra.
All right, just to follow up, Bob, thank you for that. It sounds like your revised ground-mounted solar array plan is a lot like the initial one that you presented, where they were all clustered up at the northern end of the lot. And there too, there was quite a lot of tree removal. So one of the main points that we made in our select board summary letter to you was that according to state standards and the standards of just about every other conservation organization, people should maximize the use of rooftops before they use, before they disrupt forest or natural land. And so I just haven't seen any plans to even try to use the rooftops here, or parking area cover with solar panels. So
Well, no, the
I don't see an effort.
the parking area is completely covered in solar canopy.
Oh, good. Well, I stand corrected.
And I don't think your characterization of the amount of tree cutting up on the north, there's a lot of cleared land up there already. The major part of the tree clearing to put in solar was going to be on the eastern side of the property, and we've
I saw that actually, according to Google Maps, about half of the area that you were originally going to use for solar up at the north there was trees, and the other half was clear. So it is a concern.
I didn't say no trees, believe me, but I reduced the amount of tree loss by probably 60% in terms of solar tree loss. The tree loss caused.
Okay.
Can I ask one more quick question about solar?
Yes.
Are we going to get information on exactly how that solar power will be distributed? Who will own the panels? Will all the solar be used by the development itself, or will it be sold elsewhere? This may be out of the realm of what you want to talk about tonight, Rick. I understand you can pass it on, but I think it's important.
No. This is what I was fishing for. Other site issues that are live issues. So, Bob, this is probably going to be owned by the condominium, I would guess, and I imagine they would use most of the power for themselves and sell any excess back to the grid like everybody else. No?
No, I think it'll be more complicated than that, Rick. It really is driven by federal regulations and programs, to be honest with you.
It's important that we know that, though. I think it is.
Yeah, I'm not 100% clear on that, but we can talk more about it for sure. It's not fully worked out is the answer.
It sounds like it might be useful to send along, if not a full set of site plans, but the latest iteration, even in summary form, of where you are on solar, so that the people who are most interested in it can look at that.
Sure.
And if you want to, in the cover letter, say this isn't final, it might change, to reserve your rights so that nobody tries to mousetrap you on that. That would be, but it would be helpful to see the latest plan.
Yeah, no, to be honest, my goal has been to try to create enough power that it is equal to the amount of power used on the site. Solar is very complicated in terms of obviously net metering and the grid and all of that. And I'm working on all of that, but I don't have all those answers for you right now. That's a little bit not that. It all can be done. It's just not top of the list right now.
That is something you'll want to know, though, correct? That is something the town will want to know to make sure that.
Well, I'm not 100. Again, this is something we can talk about, Marion. It's not clear to me how and Paul can perhaps at some point, maybe not tonight, address how all of that comes together in terms of what the ZBA's regulatory authority is. Over not over where the array is and all of that. I totally get that's your authority, but in terms of who owns it and how it's financed and technically does this home, I mean that's very kind of squishy these days. It's all about creating power.
Let me try to say the quiet part out loud and see if Mr. Haverty agrees with me, which is there's going to be a lot of interest within the town from a lot of quarters in how that solar works and what happens with the power and things like that. There are very severe limits on how much the ZBA in a 40B context can direct it.
Right. That was my point. Thank you.
How's that? How to do, Paul?
Fine, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. Other key issues in site planning not related to water supply, septic, storm drainage that are major open issues. Mr. Moore.
Sorry, thank you. Brian Moore, 49 Farm Road, neighbor to the development. One thing the ZBA might consider is conditioning the approval on making sure that those solar panels are on the roofs of the properties being built to ensure that they are the people who actually benefit from that power moving forward. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Okay. Others? All right. Hearing none. Okay. So I'd like to try to, it's 8:03. We're going to try to wrap up by 9 as we often do. We were deep in discussion on public versus private water last time. We hadn't reached a conclusion, but the board members were having some interesting thoughts. There's been a lot more input from them, from the development team and from the neighbors. And maybe we ought to just dive right back into that. The development team did supply very recently, last couple of days, the septic plans. I hope all interested parties are looking at those carefully. Thank you for putting them in, by the way, Bob and development team, because a lot of people wanted to see them. And in a perfect world, we'd spend some time tonight on septic and nitrate loading, the issue that was raised by the neighbors in the Horsley report last time. But I'm going to suggest, board members, that we try to see if we can wrestle a little more with public versus private water supply. How do you feel about that?
Sounds good to me, Rick.
Okay.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
Okay. So, trying to recap, I'll try to be fair to everybody in this, but I'm sure all of you will speak up quickly if I do not. The development team is pretty strongly in favor of private. They think that is a better site layout. They think that will be less cost, more efficient. Whereas the people who want it to be, it's probably, I hope, fair to say the development team is in favor of what's sometimes called semi-public, which is a technique. I think it's a local board of health term for the type of private system that that is at the other Murchison project downtown. So I think if the development team were running the entire show, that's what they'd be. It would be private, it would be semi-public, and there might be some additional testing, but that's the way it would be, and the wells would be where they put them in their design. Other people have a lot of different views. You've seen the letters. A bunch of them have come in. Board members. First, I want to hear where the board is before anything else. Zach, I think you were more on the private side, but am I misremembering where you were?
I don't think I was anywhere. I was trying to just understand the cost differential and understand, I think, a little bit more of what we're comparing, which I don't know that we've seen that level of detail. I sort of projected, 20, 10, 15, 20-year cost of maintenance. So I think that's a consideration to think about for either system, especially this hybrid system as you described. I think that would be a very good, what's the maintenance schedule look like? How does that burden the residents collectively? How is that distributed? Is there special assessments? Is there an annual fee? Things of that nature. I think that's just something that I think is important. And given given the PFAS issues we all I've heard about in town, Not that they're insurmountable by any means, but just maintenance of filtration and stuff gets expensive depending on concentrations, and so just how that's all being passed along in the various options.
Okay, Mr. Fitch, where are you?
Well, I have to say at this point, I am persuaded by the developer's argument on the semi-public system.
Some form of that.
Yes.
Mr. Labby.
7 separate wells. Yep.
Oh, Todd, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Would help if you could hear me. Where I come at this is really the sensitivity of the testing and the implied expenses and how that goes. I see tremendous value in the testing of a public system where the water is aggregated and tested, because if there were any fouling, you'll identify it and the cost is then borne equitably across the residents. So I certainly see the merits of that. Alternatively, I also see the merits of the 7 distinct wells as being proposed by the applicant. What concerns me with that is what would be the cadence of testing. We all know that, as residents in Sherborn, we can take it upon ourselves to test our wells as we would like. But having to think about 32 separate families and how that complexity gets multiplied. And with some of the complications around the contaminations in the water, some wells may become contaminated while others are not, and you wouldn't know unless you're testing all of them. So the testing is the real sensitivity, I think, that has me thinking that public water supply could have its merits.
Okay. And I remain relatively open-minded. I mean, the safety features of the public type of water supply obviously appeal a great deal. The site layout and relative simplicity of the proposed siting plan, I think makes some sense to me as well. And so I'm sort of leaning towards a private, but with very robust testing that is essentially identical to what the testing that you do for a public water supply. We just bake it into the conditions. And Paul, you can tell me if this runs afoul of it becoming commonly owned. We'd have them individually owned by the individual units that are affected. I assume you're going to sort of group units, and unit 1, 2, 3 will own this well, and 4, 5, 6 will own another one, and thus and such. But maybe we could have the condominium documents, even though those are separately owned, command regular testing on specified dates, so they're all being tested at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, Rick, I'm 100%, sorry to take over, Paul, but I'm deep in this. And if I misspeak, Paul, on the law, then jump all over me. But I'm hugely in favor of testing, and if you want to require testing on these wells, I'm okay with that. At some level, I don't know whether these wells need public water supply testing regimes or not, but I'm happy to take a look at that with you. And I'm in favor of that. Absolutely. Whether DEP would be okay from a legal perspective with certainly the condominium cannot have any joint ownership of any
I get
of the
that.
water supply.
Yeah.
Whether DEP would be okay with the condominium having rules saying to its owners who own the wells that they have to test. It runs a little bit against my libertarian thinking, but I can't tell you whether, if DEP is okay with it, I'm okay with it.
Well, if your libertarian thinking would be more satisfied with a public water supply, we can certainly do it that way, Bob.
Definitely not.
Okay. Okay. All right. Mr. Haverty, you were about to speak on the legal issue.
Take care of it for me. You're good.
Okay. All right. So All right, so that's on the table for discussion, but we have a lot of people who do not like public water supply, or excuse me, do not like any of the private solutions. And now is their turn to speak because a lot of them wrote in and they're entitled to be heard. And I'll start with Daryl Beardsley. I don't know what your position is, but
I have a lot potentially to say, unless you're happy with what I say right up front. So I don't know, did you want to take
the game isn't to make me happy.
Comments first? If people have been writing into you, I could go either way.
Well, I want people to be heard and I want the board to hear them because certainly my position in my mind is not made up on this point. I have a leaning, and my sense of my other board members is they have a leaning based on what they've heard, but we're all trying to do the right thing and listen to people. So if you have strongly held views that it should be public water supply, speak up.
I have views based on my role on the Board of Health. So, and I'm going to share screen. Let me lower my hand, get that out of the way. Okay. I just want to address this idea that somehow semi-public water supplies is the sweet spot between these two issues. I will note that until just a month or so ago, when our regulatory updates got published, the term semi-public existed in our regulations, but was never used, was not really well defined. We had never addressed it. We did not apply it to any of the prior projects. It just, they were all treated as private water supplies for the, the fields ultimately transitioned to a public water supply, but Abbey Road was just private water supplies, meeting the requirements of not having crossed the thresholds for the DEP's public water supplies. And that was really the only determination. In our recent update, which came after this project was submitted, so I don't even know that it would necessarily apply because this project came in under the prior regulations, but we just provided a definition for what we would consider semi-public water supplies. And other than that, and some comment that maybe we would look for different kinds of testing from them, but we don't have any mechanisms yet for tracking compliance, and then for handling reports coming in and receiving those either directly from a lab, as does DEP, which has wonderfully established systems where it's already set up with the labs. They upload documents. DEP has software that scans through those reports and identifies problem areas, exceedances of standards, and then it can launch into follow-up with the facilities that have some violation or exceedance or other issue with their water supplies. So it's just a well-functioning system. We don't have that to support it. So if you're going to have people required to be testing, who's going to enforce that? So that's just a difficulty.
Okay. Fair question.
So we don't have something, and really we have never used for any other project in town. We have never used the term semi-public water supplies.
Okay.
Again.
Forget the term.
So just to clear that up, that's
supply. Put it out of your mind. Don't get distracted by that. What I think I'm trying to talk about. What I think I'm trying to talk about is a testing regime like they use for public water supplies, which we would
and I'm going to
impose by
show you
condition.
some examples of what a testing regime looks like for public water supplies that could
Right.
either be borrowed or what have you. But
Right.
just the general ideas, we thought someday we'd like to go towards bridging this gap between a well for a single family home and the DEP threshold for.
Right.
So we're only
It's
setting the
helpful.
stage. That's as far as we've gotten thus far.
Okay.
All right. So now let me get to maybe the crux of the issue, which seems to be cost has been, it seems like that might be one of the major concerns. I think before I get to this though, there may also be the preference for the wells distributed across the property, the multiple wells, because if you're thinking of a public water supply as being a single big well, that requires a zone 1, which is a circle around the well of a significant diameter. And the uses within that circle are restricted, and that makes it hard to fit in the other pieces of your development that you might want. So maybe that's also another thing to address before I go into these costs, but is Mass DEP permits a public water supply to be made up of multiple wells. You could have every one of the wells that's presented there. I mean, there have to be some other things I think we chatted about. If the zone 1's extended onto conservation land, there just have to be some, or town-owned land, there'd have to be a formal agreement for the town to protect that zone 1 for the public water supply. So that's a legal issue that would have to be worked out. I don't know if the town's amenable or not. If the land is if they're planning to keep it in conservation, the issue of not putting a gas station or using pesticides or a junkyard or, you know, a road and those kinds of things would be, I would assume, not issues. But in any case, so they permit multiple wells to be connected together. And what would make it a public water supply is rather than dividing it up and only using each well to serve a specific number of people that's below 25, you could combine all those wells into a single distribution point and then distribute the water back out throughout the project. And you wouldn't necessarily have to run all of the wells at once. I'll get to that in a little bit, but you could place those wells, connect. It would probably make some of the placements a little bit easier if you're not trying to make it. I think you just have more flexibility in then how you're running the water lines to buildings. It's going to get very complicated with separate systems serving different ones. Septic is trying to run through there, which is part of the reason we like to see the well and septic at the same time, because there are requirements of how those two kinds of conveyance pipes underground need to have certain relationships or not have relationships to one another. So, all right, so I'm going to start though with just this simpler concept, is that we already have these 3 PWSs in town for projects that are somewhat similar, and the finances are working out. Woodhaven, looked at Woodhaven a bunch for my mother, and the rents are really reasonable. So it's not, and Woodhaven has had quite a number of special issues with their system over the years. The fields at Sherborn, very recent, same size as this, same 32 units, 40B, and same with Leland Farms, over 50% are affordable, and that was still financially viable to do. At the fields at Sherborn, I don't know exactly what the range is because they're metering the units for water use, and then they're billed for well and septic combined, because there is still some servicing for the septic system to be done there as well. And it's running about $100 a month per unit, which I hear people are satisfied with because they don't have to think about it anymore. You know, it's taken care of. They're not worrying about testing and repairs to the system. And part of that money is not strictly for the ongoing operation, but it's also for building up a reserve for maintenance, which is a requirement under PWS. So that.
But again, we could bake all that into our requirements.
You could, Howard. Okay, as long as if the Board of Health has to enforce it, like the DEP would,
I think,
we
I
would
think, I
have
think
to
it's much
come up
more a
with.
matter of either putting it in a private restriction or in the condominium documents where you have to do X, Y, and Z. And if you don't, it's a lien on your unit.
Okay. All right. So I think I'll skip this because I don't know if the inclination would be to go with the multiple wells, or one could do one well if there was a way to fit it on. I haven't tried to map that out on the plans because that's not my choice. That's the developer's choice. But the differences aren't that great between I use the Laurel Field wells as an example because they're very recent, so they're updated costs, and they were sizing it to be very high producing wells. So didn't happen to work out that way just yet with the testing thus far, but they were sized for a very high flow that would have covered this kind of thing. And it's not much different than what it costs to do more of a private well. Depth affects cost, but that's a complicated topic. Right, you would need a water supply operator with a PWS. But because it's a small system, I'll just jump down. Mass DEP estimates at a minimum of 6 hours on site and 12 hours total for an operator. It's not hiring an operator who's there full time. Smaller systems don't require as much. They do have to cover things. They have to respond to emergencies, just like the town hires an operator who works in the area. They'll come and they'll take care they'll spend a short amount of time and they move on to another location and do it. So the testing, I'll show you what a test schedule looks like. Initial permitting, I'm guessing from, what I'm thinking the flow rate might be at this end, but I've been trying to just get some clarification on some other tweaks of costs. This is for much larger PWSs.
And Daryl,
but I'm trying to verify some of that for cost. Yes.
Daryl, are all these materials can be sent to Jeannie so she can put them on the?
Yes, I'm going to send this
Thank
whole
you.
PDF.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then
Thank
I
you.
obviously have more details.
Right.
And there is annual reporting to DEP required, besides the lab reports that get uploaded. But it is on an online system. I've prepared these reports for clients. Once you get the basic information in, it's pretty easy to do the subsequent reports. So not a big time consuming thing. All right, so this is really about that. I've communicated with DEP to confirm that multiple wells are fine. The regulations get a little tricky when they talk about well fields because when they wrote it for overburden aquifers, and these would be bedrock. So some of the things that I was reading didn't make sense to me, and they said, no, that doesn't apply. That was only for overburden aquifer, although the reg doesn't say that. There is also the choice. So if you were still going to keep the 7 wells or whatever, 8 wells, 7, 8, could be 6, just depends on what's the volume collectively that might be produced from that. But not all of them have to run all the time because there is some kind of, it just might not be necessary. Part of the argument that I think really makes a multiple well public water supply so much more resilient for the residents of this development. From that perspective, I think the Board of Health feels strongly that having the interconnected wells, you can cut off a well, say if their contamination shows up in one. You could take that offline, use the other wells, and then if you do need that additional supply, figure out whether you're going to add treatment or what other things might be done. However, if it's just different collections of the units within the development are tied to one well. One goes bad and they have no recourse, and it's going to be difficult to site another well and to get the access to that appropriately and all the rest, and rerun pipes. It's going to be a really expensive thing to take care of. And meanwhile, their next door neighbor is fine because they're on another well. Or once the pumping gets going, even if you do a pump test, there's a difference of sustained pumping over a long period of time once you have full build out. So there might just be some preferential draw by one well that takes away from the productivity of another well. And that's really hard to determine precisely up front. And so that resilience aspect of having these wells work together to supply a community is a big driver for the Board of Health. And I just wanted to show you a couple other things too. So I have a note here, finished versus raw sampling. So finished water is once you connect all of those wells together into the single point that then is distributed out from there, that's the finished water, because there may or may not be treatment. So they're calling it finished, but that's the combined and final thing. So it's very rarely that on these required sampling schedules that DEP will include raw water, but they do every now and then. And it's a good idea periodically to check what is the status of the raw water in case that is illuminating in some way. But so this is the only one. It's a 2-page schedule. And so they're all finished, FFF, and then the one raw. So if you wanted to do any kind of sampling comparable to what Mass DEP specifies for wells, and they all look a little different. This one is for Woodhaven. I also have the one for the fields at Sherborn. And they do tweak these, like the frequency of testing for different parameters according to what they see in the water over time. Like, is this something that needs to be tracked or not? So you'll see different frequencies for different things. So PFAS in the downtown area is an issue. We know that from really the town wells in general. So there's a lot of testing going on here versus, and here we are, the fields at Sherborn, PFAS once a year until they see any kind of indication of more of a problem. But the gross alpha particle activity, they're seeing something that's coming out of the rock there. And also uranium is being required there. I think this is the only time I've ever seen one of these sampling schedules that had uranium on it. So there can be variations depending on what you find, is the case. So what I had also done was calculated based on this, combined with approximate costs for tests. And I didn't get a chance to clean up that spreadsheet as much as I would have liked. Otherwise, I would be sharing it, but I think it might be a little more confusing. But I was coming out kind of consistently across Woodhaven, looking at the number of people or units in Woodhaven and looking at the number of units at the fields at Sherborn, was something in the $60 to $90 per year per unit for the costs of the sampling. So it's not, it's not enormously burdensome. You get a wide range of things for that. And for basic homeowners tests, you could spend that you would spend way more than that. You would spend, I'd say hold on, I had it, like 3 types of tests. Some labs offer what's called a homeowner's package, just for comparison to what a private well home, that any of the rest of us, not the more aggressive program that, or more elaborate, I won't say aggressive, more elaborate program that Bob has been talking about. So homeowner's package might come around if you only tested, let's see, you could spend pretty easily $1,200 on the most basic. Like a homeowner's package usually has basic bacteria, some hardness, and a variety of other parameters. You could do volatile organic compounds and PFAS, and that would run you about $1,200.
Okay, so one of the things I'm taking away is we could design our own testing, but it's not quite as easy as just copy a page out of a DEP reg and say, do this once a year. It's more nuanced and granular.
And to have the support system, there's another dimension of the PWS that's important, and that was implied in that fee that the fields at Sherborn charges, is that you're building up a reserve for repairing things, because DEP has seen with shared systems on the septic and on the water supply side that problems will persist, because people, when the crunch comes that a pump needs to be replaced or something else, and nobody wants to agree on what the path forward is, and therefore the problems linger. So they have a requirement that you are building up in escrow or accounts or whatever else to be ready to address those things when they come up. And that's already established.
Okay.
So
very helpful.
Those are just a few of the reasons why we are advocating for public water supply.
Can I ask you to stop sharing your screen just so I can see some other people, just to give some other people a chance to weigh in? Very, very helpful and detailed and granular, so thank you. Ms. Raggy.
Well, I'm speaking a little bit from experience, having lived at Abbey Road and had the benefit of this hybrid system, if you will. I have found that, or I firmly believe that the Zoning Board of Appeals could eliminate a lengthy conversation by just having a policy of every development that is with multi-homes that comes before it have a public water supply. The hybrid that is not able to be judiciously monitored, in that it's up to the block that owns that well system to decide to test it or not. And at Abbey Road, I know the block I was in was very conscientious and tested it, but I don't know, that's not a given. And I don't think that Sherborn has the manpower to put it in condo documents and expect it to be able to be enforced. So there's the monitoring of the quality of the water. And then there's the burden of the home ownership of infrastructure. And I moved in April 2018, and in July 2019, we already had a couple $1,000s worth of repairs, if you will, that needed to be done to the equipment, which is, in that kind of a community, not the end of the world, but certainly, as I think Daryl highlighted, not an equitable way to say, okay, so my neighbors don't have anything to pay, but I'm saddled with, my share of this couple of $1,000s. Meanwhile, we had intermittent water delivery. So I just don't, I really feel that the hybrid system is flawed to a point where I would hope that the Zoning Board of Appeals could just mandate any municipal, any development that comes before them that has multiple homes, dwellings, whatever, has to have a public water supply. It's really, that's a win-win. You've got the water tested and you've got a mechanism for equitability for shared expenses.
Let's come back to whether or not a public water supply is appropriate for this project. Because even if I waved a magic wand right now and we had that rule, and the developer here thought we should waive it, they'd ask us to waive it as a burdensome local rule. So it's not, so everything you say about the merits or lack of merits or arguments for having a public water supply here apply, but the board of the ZBA having an omnibus rule is not a magic fix. Mr. Johnson.
Hi. Yeah, I would just support any kind of I would support, I know we talked about this quasi-public and I'm not as familiar with that, but I would support something which would basically have DEP regulation on the water supply. If that's a public water supply, and I'm quite sure it is, I believe it meets the intent of public water supply, and DEP made the limit of only, as few as 25 people per day, which is a relatively small amount. And especially on a density like this, I think it was DEP would have the intent on actually regulating the overall water supply to this specific development as a public water supply. I think Sarah said it best, where it's like our local government, small town like Sherborn, is not going to adequately regulate this. We're not going to, it's going to be a lot to ask 10 years from now to have it on the files and realize to stay on top of it and stay on top of the contaminants. I believe Daryl brought up PFAS in there, which is a relatively new recognized contaminant within the last 5 or 10 years. And staying on top of those requirements is what DEP does best, and it's what they're going to do. I don't think the cost burden is going to be outrageous based on what I've seen for other developments. We're talking 32 units here. It's really relatively modest. It seems like I like the idea of networking wells, because just like Daryl said, you can turn one off if it goes bad, and you have that certain redundancy in there, and you have the protection in perpetuity. In the long term, you have the protection for new contaminants, and just you have someone in DP who is watching it and regulating it. It can actually do enforcement. Like to put something in a homeowner association to lien someone's property if they don't do something, and you have a homeowner association that's the regulator. It's just, you can't guarantee what's going to happen or not. It's much more just conservative and appropriate, and I believe within the intent of the water supply regulations to have DEP regulate the water supply for this specific development. That's all.
All right, thank you. Other comments? I don't see other hands. Oh, here's Mr. Moore, Brian Moore.
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate our previous letter and basically hats off to Eric for describing exactly what we were saying and have been saying for the last couple months, which is that the intent of the DEP regulations is to regulate water supplies over a certain size. I think it's in the best interest of those who are going to be our future neighbors in this development that they're afforded those protections and no other shortcuts are provided, which would allow someone to circumnavigate those protections. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. And I see comments in the chat, not very many. I just want to remind everybody the chat is not part of our record. So if you have something important to say, don't say it in the chat. Make sure you say it on the recording. Okay, other comments for or against public, private, or any sort of mixed type?
Well, I have my hand up here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, just, listening to this and also, being aware of the discussions. I'm here as just a private citizen, but I've heard a lot about the project on the Groundwater Protection Committee, but I'm not speaking at all for the GPC. It's just my observation. It just sounds like the public solution is where all local systems should be going. I mean, as Eric mentioned, there's redundancy. There's also like, if you think of a computer system, or whether multiple servers or whatever, that one load can take another load, if one goes down, the system adjusts to it. Seeing how we don't know where PFAS are gonna go in terms of pollution. You know, the federal government is lowering its drastically lowering its advised, or maybe, you know, maximum for PFAS. So we do know there's going to be more expenses about about water supply in general, and more disruptions with the weather changes and everything else. So just think, you know, part of the plan of Farm Road is this open land distribution of the houses and so forth, which is, you know, in some ways, you know, forward thinking. So why would we not want to, or not have something that makes so much more sense in terms of a real system of public water supply that really does protect the residents? Because there's definitely going to be more disruption to local water supplies and individual water supplies, and to wells, you know, what with you know, higher water tables one year and droughts the next, and what that does to the sediment and so forth. So I just think it seems to make so much sense, and if there's a way to just work this out, you know, for this project, it seems to be more in the way of a real model moving forward for the future, for how towns are going to need to just organize their water supply, because if we don't, the problems are just going to intensify. That's it.
Right. Thank you for your comments. Other parties to speak on public, private, semi-public, semi-private, anywhere in between. Okay, Sean Wang. You're muted, sir.
I heard both sides of it. It's definitely a great discussion and debate on it. I'm just thinking of one thing of here later on if I get a time. So from the geology setting over here is relatively in the smaller, similar geologic setting for those wells. So to making them lumping together or each individual is a big difference. It's definitely need to be considered. And second is, I agree that, so all the, from my experience, from like in the size of Sherborn, from the regulatory perspective, enforcing environmental protection, I have seen this one much more enforced than many other big cities. So I don't see the size of it. If we have to come up like a semi-public rules based on the water quality tested from the wells, to coming up a really effective testing, I believe all this can be done. So, and thirdly, is to see how will people use their money effectively to safeguard their water. If something not very relevant to people's health, people say, yeah, that's not my business. But if this is like a water supply, I don't think people will just ignore it. So how they will be effectively use it and making the cost effective for the affordable. I feel a semi-public is providing the flexibility, but also have a mechanism there to be safeguarded by good devised testing schemes and the follow-up. And the Board of Health is also very capable, knowledgeable in that perspective for reviewing it quickly, you know. So that's what I see from my experience in Sherborn.
Okay, it is after 8:45. I think what I'd like to do, board members, is move past this topic for now. I've certainly heard a lot, and there's a lot to think about. I'm not willing to we certainly don't have to make any decision tonight. And I don't think I am. I think I want to ruminate on the materials we've gotten and the materials we're going to get on the public versus private. And I might suggest to the board members that we move briefly towards septic, so that maybe the development team could present their septic plans that were filed this week and sort of walk everybody through them, so that in the next month people can be and people made fun of my comment last time that people could throw rocks at some of my ideas. I mean that in the constructive sense of here's the proposal that's out there. Let's see what's good about it, what's bad about it. And so I might, board members, are you okay with shifting over to septic just so we can get that on the table?
Yes.
Yes, makes sense.
All right, I'm seeing the heads. So, Deshaun, I'm betting that you are probably going to be the presenter for the septic system. But you're still muted,
Bob,
sir.
do you have anything to say or before I started, Bob? Okay. So,
You're muted
all
too,
right.
Bob.
Oh,
I said it's great. Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
okay.
Thank you.
okay,
All right.
thank you. I will share the plan. I just got.
Yes, please.
Okay.
And to the extent that you're ready to speak to the nitrate loading issue, great. And if you're not, it's okay. There's going to be more discussion.
Yes, okay, thank you. Yeah, I will go probably not to, so I hope everybody's still awake and with all this Nancy Beatty intelligent discussions. I learned a lot and I appreciate it. The public and the board are giving us all the feedbacks in the design. And so this is just overall plan. So just sort of you get some kind of settings. So this, oops, I think let's still blow up. Okay, this one. So this is a little bit more, you can see the whole, as far as you see, this one actually reflect the solar panel where we just discussed, but sort of you see it, there's no more here. We will, so in a way, in our plan, the septic plan already reflect that change. So this is the leaching field, or we call soil absorption system area. And I'm going to enlarge it a little bit. And this is the IA system for the pre-treatment before disposed to the leaching field. The leaching field is pressure dosed, 3 equal leaching field. 2 of them are just adjacent to each other. The other one is a little bit set aside. So, and so all the homes is collected through manholes and the sewer line and all coming feeding to a primary tank. So which is sized for the requirement is I think it's a 15,000 gallon tank, and then go to 3 train of treatment. It's a septic 13.5, which will treat it to exceed the requirement of DEP Title V secondary treatment is called 30-30-25. It's a 30 TSS, total suspensed solids, and the 30 BOD and 25 total nitrogen. And the ones for this case, we are having them to treat it 23% better to 19 parts per million on TSS. For total nitrogen. The others probably will be less than 32. So before will be discharged. The water, today I was just in, I get pretty much an hour before the hearing, Bob said you need to do a presentation. So I probably can get some photos to see the treated and pre-treated water. It's like in day and night, it's very clean water compared with the effluent from a regular septic tank. So then discharge to the pressure dosing again, which is more uniformly spread it out. So the leaching field is setting about 108 feet from the wetland border. And so which the DEP Title V require 50. So we are more than double. And the leaching field also set to the closest well is on Farm Road. 55 is 141, it's upgraded, it's here. So it's also exceed the local bylaw requirement and of course meet the DEP Title V requirement. And so the total acreage, as we said, we have 14 acres. With the treatment, we can technically, for nitrogen budget purpose, we can put 660 gallons per acre. But here we only designed for 550 per acre. So the nitrogen, just from the total nitrogen, it's a 23% less than DEP allow or required. And that's just from a big picture. And I want you to see is, I want to go a little bit, probably won't have the time to go through all the detailed hydrogeological condition, but I want to point out some very basic facts. So even though we have 14 acres total land, but as you know, there's the town land is also shedding water to here. We total actually have 22 acres wooded land and coming to shedding water toward the leaching field area. So which is will even dilute much more without even going into the calculation. So, and for the soils, we have 8 soil test pit, and so 8 with the monitoring wells in it. Let's see, maybe I can use the bigger one now, so to get a little bit better. Okay, here. So the test pit is pretty much 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's some of repeated because the first time we get there, Mark and I get there, we didn't hit water, so we used a very big excavators. And second time we went there and say, let's dig in at the lowest location. That's why you see 2 test pits next to each other. So we keep digging. Finally, we hit some water at the bottom. And what putting in the car, so the water really observed that 2 lower monitoring wells. And that water, we compare the observed elevation with the wetland, with the wetland elevation. So the water table, like 110 feet away from wetland, is almost the same. So it means that water was almost in the aquifer perspective. It's very permeable. Otherwise, you will see a significant pitch toward the wetlands. So all others are dry, and these 2 wells at the close more toward the wetland is almost the same. And the perk test, we did 4, and they're almost identical, 2 3s and 1 4 1 5. So it's a low B sand, coarse median low B sand consistently throughout the site. And if you're looking into the let me see if I can get my hydrogeological report photo. So yeah, here. So sorry, I didn't rotate it, but it's okay. This is the site. So we are in a kind of a 3 formation region. So even though they only draw a line, but when you have a tectonic movements, they're not going to just really get a one line. They're going to crumble the rock and crashing the rocks in this general zone. So we had our well, just one well on 53 Farm Road. We tested 11 gallon per minute. That's just that one well, which is equivalent. You can supply probably the whole subdivision it's based on the public water supply standard even. So I'm just giving it from a quick hydrogeologic perspective of the well. So they're in there, and we are in that valley. That valley have very thick soils, and there's a Charlton, which is basically hydrologic soil group B, very permeable soils. So I just want to mention and at the depths, of course, we have old crop, and we also have good soil. So, and in the front, Mark and I was there, we're digging when we were digging in the front, 53 Farm Road, we're digging over 22, we still didn't hit the ledge. So that's just, and it's dry too. So that's really surprised. I think we are lucky we hit that. So we find this area with the significant depths of the good soils. That's like, okay. So that's from, and if you're looking surrounding here, the other good things is we are kind of almost in the lower end of the valley. All the houses and the water supply wells are upgrading. The closest one, I think, is 350. And the neighbor's well, the closest one, 49 Farm Road, I believe is over 300 feet. So which is close the wetlands on the other side of it. I think it's a close the gradient, and this is upgraded. And 53 Farm Road is 252. So we are meeting the strictest, the local bylaw. Okay, one more thing is the groundwater separation. We are stepping down because of deep soils. On that, if we based on the real observed groundwater, even with correction, average, we have a 10 feet of groundwater separation from the bottom of the leaching trenches to the corrected, mounted high groundwater table. And if we say, oh, okay, you use the bottom of what you dig, so we use that and then interpret it, we still have 7. So it's really have a very big groundwater separation for the treatment. And the soils, from our experience and from the science study, the pure sand may not be the best, but 3 to 5 is really a good, decent soil for filtration and all that function. And they are sitting in a place, almost no downgrading wells. The closest public community public water supplying wells is close to wetlands at this 2,000 feet away. And so there's no other public water supply, and it's just tucked away from anywhere ideal settings with the combination of good soils, deep groundwater, and the location in this valley. So I think that's what I would try to stop here, maybe ask questions rather than going into too much nitty-gritty. We did the groundwater mountain analysis, use very conservative values, and so it's a minima given the good soils. It's like a 0.7 for the combined field, 0.72, and then 0.61 for the smaller ones. Even combined together, they are like a bear shade. They don't really close each other that much. Even you add them together just to say, hey, you both impact to each other. It's less than 2 feet. We have 10 feet to 7 feet groundwater separation. So there's no concern at all for this leaching field. So that's what I would, in summary. And you did mention about nitrogen, as I explained to you. If I really go to using the real one, and with all the reduced nitrogen to start with is only 19, and with all the water diluting into it, I don't think we are impact any people. And I don't think wetlands itself in the Wetlands Protection Act have any specified nitrogen level. So that's what I stop here. So probably
Okay.
go on the questions.
And can I ask you to give back the screen? That was a great, crisp, and short presentation, so thank you.
Thank you.
Can you stop sharing the screen, please?
Sure.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, well, we are at 8:59. Mr. Moore, 30 seconds. This is not your last chance.
Hi, Brian Moore, 49 Farm Road. I'm very disappointed that I'm not going to be able to provide a slide from DeShang's report, which I reviewed and have critiqued here tonight.
It's that you can't provide. Save it. We're coming right back to this topic next time. And if you think
this report, Rick, I'm sorry, if I could just say this. The problem is that this is going to be distributed to all these town boards who are going to be reviewing it as if it's factually correct. And the report
so distribute your counterpoint. If you think it's wrong, distribute it. Send it to Jeannie. We'll put it up on the website. Everyone will get it.
My counterpoint is simply this: there are errors, omission, and mistakes in DeShang's report. There are numerous errors and mistakes. And his K values are wrong, his mounting analysis is incorrect, and it's embarrassing. And I can't believe that our boards are going to have to spend time and effort critiquing something which isn't factually correct.
Well, I'm sorry,
Chairman,
I disagree with you. Sorry, Bob. Brian, I disagree with you that the development team is not entitled to submit their materials. You are entitled, however, to, as I say, throw rocks at them, and I mean that in the constructive, non-violent way of saying, here's where I think you're wrong in this, here's where I think you're wrong in that, here's where I think you're wrong in the other. And I encourage you not to wait for the next hearing to do that. Do it in writing. You write us a lot, and you write well, and send in your position. Jeannie will put it up on the website, and everyone will have 30 days to look at it. But
I hope they look at
I'm
it.
not gonna tell the development team they can't submit their materials. I'm sorry. They
Mr.
can't.
Chairman, may I speak?
Very briefly,
I-
Mr. Murchison.
Yes, I just would like to ask that the board not allow this type of, to call the Shang's report embarrassing is not appropriate.
Okay.
If he wants to critique, he can
Bob,
critique all of the
that's
science.
enough. There have been a number of things said by the development team that other people didn't like. I get it that you don't appreciate and agree with Mr. Moore's comments.
I think it's
We're gonna
rude.
try to avoid the UPenn problem of being the speech police. We're gonna ask everybody to be polite. You get to put in your report. Mr. Moore gets to put in what he wishes to put in, and we'll let the public process sort that out. Ms. Stiller, did you want to say something?
Please, Andrea Stiller, 205 Woodland. I'm on the Groundwater Protection Committee. So I wasn't going to comment on it, but I do concur with Brian about some of the calculation deficiencies, the hydraulic conductivity and the mounding. And I just encourage Steve Booley to really look at that in detail. What I was going to say was just in the presentation, I think there is a well that is located at 142 feet, according to DeShang's report, 142 feet from the soil absorbed from the leach field. And that's pretty close. I think that's 55 Farm Road. And if you're pumping, 8,000 plus gallons of wastewater into the ground, that's quite close. The fractures, the bedrock is fractured as he noted, which and as he notes in his report, it does provide a way to get rid of that water pretty quickly, but it's not ideal. What you want is a thick soil system, soil absorbed, a thick overburden, thick soil, not for it to escape into the fractures of the bedrock, because that's where it really can affect nearby drinking wells. And I'll just add briefly, I saw PFAS is a new, concern for everyone for Massachusetts. I saw a DP presentation where they sampled over 14,000 wells, water supply, public, private, in Massachusetts. And what they found was, a substantial percentage exceeded the 20 PPT. I mean, we're seeing that in our own town, so we know about that. But what they did was correlate that with the septic density. So residential septic density and the locations where the groundwater exceeded the 20 PPT of PFAS. And there's an intensely direct correlation. So it is, it seems to be the PFAS is appearing because it's in the products that we use, it's in our clothing that we wash, and it does get into the septic system. So I think we need to be really careful with our septic and water supply situation in these larger density, larger septic volume projects. And that's all I have for now. I know we're running out of time, but
all right, and there'll be more opportunities. Steve Booley, I know you're listening carefully to all this, but just tell me you are, because that's all I need to hear.
Yes, we are listening very closely, Mr. Chair.
All right, fine. All right. We are at 9:06. Daryl, if you have something that is really important and relevant and cannot wait and cannot be written down, I'd be glad to hear it. But I think you hear between the lines there.
Well, I had something short. Let me see if I can remember what it is. Oh, so the Board of Health is reviewing the septic plans, came in earlier this week. That's underway. Just as a matter of process, is it appropriate or inappropriate for Steve Booley and Mark to communicate, which might help resolve. Yeah, I view it as streamlining what gets done, because maybe Mark's already satisfied with something. Steve doesn't have to check that. I don't know how that works,
I
but
would strongly encourage the Board of Health to reach out to the peer reviewer on matters submitted by the development team, and in this case, it is the development team septic plan, so the peer reviewer can legitimately look at it.
okay.
Obviously,
And
Mark would not and could not say, "Great, and Steve, I want to take 5 days of your time to talk
Right.
about just my," yeah, he's got to be judicious in his use of the time. But I think it would be efficient, and I personally I would welcome it.
because I think, Mark has identified a few things that he has questions about, and maybe Steve would offer another
Right.
insight.
Right, for sure.
All right. The other brief thing I just want to say right now, because it was mentioned several times, about how there was going to, because the site is big, it exceeds, the septic system discharge is going to be less than what could be assigned under the nitrogen sensitive loading regulations of DEP. The site overall has enough acreage to take more gallons. And so then there was a discussion about and nitrogen isn't the only contaminant of concern. It's just used as a marker. So when we say nitrogen, it applies to everything else. That it was going to be significantly diluted because so much the site, there's a lot of other area on the site to receive rainwater and water to flow through. That's not how plumes from contaminated systems,
again,
whatever, work, and that has been demonstrated by the work at the fields at Sherborn, and millions of studies before.
And please write that down and send it in.
Yes, and that's why we're going to ask for the EHIR to be done. It's a system over 2,000 gallons. That's the threshold for doing mounding analysis. When we revised our regulations years ago, DEP advised that would be a good threshold for our EHIR. Thank you.
Right. Okay. And I probably anticipate that the development team is going to say, and we expect the EHIR to be something that's waived under 40B. There, see, saved a little discussion there. All right, Mary Moore.
Hi, Rick. Thanks. Super quick. Just to confirm, Brian did say that he would submit something tomorrow to Jeannie, and she can post that on the website. So thank you for that. And then I had asked last month about the process for an extension on the public hearing. It just feels like we have a lot of very large issues that haven't been resolved yet. And I'm wondering if you could maybe either in this meeting or post something about what that process would be, and if the public can be involved. And I know it's the discretion of the developer is what you told us.
Right, and I thought it did at the beginning, but obviously I didn't explain it well enough. So, so my bad. It is nearly certain to me that at the end of the next meeting, we're going to have to talk, or at some point during the next meeting, we're going to have to talk with the development team about an extension of the 180-day time, and whether they're interested in one, and how interested they are, and how much time. And typically, that is, in my experience, a series of 30 to 45-day extensions. I've never seen a development team say, "Sure, take another 5 years, we're fine." But Paul, if that's where you want to go, we're but so it is an iterative process. It's negotiated at the time. I can't forecast what the development team is going to say. I think it's very likely, based on all the live balls that we have going on here, that we're going to ask for more time. We think we've been diligent in trying to move ahead. Maybe they think we've been dragging our feet. That's for them to say. So
Okay,
we'll know
thank
more
you.
next time.
Appreciate it.
All right. Having said that, and having broken my word to Jonathan Fitch to wrap up by 9 o'clock, I've moved that we continue this hearing until January 16th, 2024, 7 p.m. Is there a second for that motion?
I seconded.
Any robust discussion, lengthy discussion of that motion? None. Okay. All in favor of adjourn, oh, Mr. Waldron, not even a member of our board, your hand's up.
I just want to do the same as you're about to do. I just want to.
Oh, okay.
Ask for a motion to adjourn select board since we were
Why
technically.
don't you guys adjourn out from under us first then?
Okay, so do I have
Go
a
ahead.
motion to adjourn the select board?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
All right, Eric? Stephen?
Aye.
And Marion?
Aye.
And I'm I as well. Thank you. Great meeting.
All right, thank you all very much. All right, now that we've gotten rid of that pesky select board, back to the oh, they're still here. The motion on the table, moved and seconded to continue the hearing till January 16th, 2024, 7 p.m. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. We do it by roll call. Novak votes aye.
Fitch, aye.
Labby, aye.
McBride, aye.
All right, motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your patience and attention to some very difficult issues.
Have a great holiday also.
And have good holidays.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you all.